Lisa had been dreaming about this moment for 5 long years. She stood at the edge of her new property, breathing in the fresh mountain air and watching the morning sun filter through the tall pine trees. After working double shifts at the hospital and saving every penny she could, she finally owned something that was truly hers. A beautiful log cabin in Sunset Ridge community. The cabin wasn't huge, just enough space for her and maybe some weekend guests. But it was perfect. The wooden walls had that warm honey color that made everything feel cozy. There was a small front porch where she could sit with her morning coffee and watch the deer wander through the forest. Behind the cabin, she had 2 whole acres of land stretching back into the woods. Lisa remembered the day she first saw the property listing online. She was sitting in the hospital break room during her lunch break when the photos popped up on her phone. Her heart started racing as she scrolled through picture after picture of this perfect little retreat. The price was just within her budget, if she used all her savings and took out a small loan. That weekend, she drove 3 hours from the city to see it in person. The real estate agent, Mrs. Johnson, was a friendly woman who had lived in the area her whole life. She walked Lisa through every room, explaining how the previous owner had built the cabin with his own hands using local timber. "You can see the craftsmanship in every detail," Mrs. Johnson had said, running her hand along the smooth wooden banister. "This place has good bones. It'll last you a lifetime if you take care of it." Lisa fell in love immediately. The main room had a stone fireplace that would be perfect for cold winter nights. The kitchen was small but functional, with windows that looked out over the forest. Upstairs, there was a cozy bedroom with slanted ceilings that made her feel like she was sleeping in a treehouse. But what really sold her was stepping out onto the back deck. The view took her breath away. Miles and miles of untouched forest stretched out before her, with mountains rising in the distance. She could hear a small creek babbling somewhere in the woods. For the first time in years, Lisa felt truly peaceful. The paperwork took a few weeks to process, but finally, the keys were in her hand. She had checked everything twice. The deed was clear, all the permits were in order, and the cabin met every local building code. The previous owner had been meticulous about keeping all the documentation organized in a neat folder that he handed over with a smile. "You're going to love it here," he told her on closing day. "This community is special. Good people, quiet living, and some of the most beautiful sunsets you'll ever see." He was right about the sunsets. Lisa made it a habit to drive up from the city every Friday evening after work. She would arrive just as the sun was starting to dip behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that she had never seen in the city. Her weekends at the cabin became the highlight of her week. She would spend Saturday mornings working in the small garden she had started behind the cabin. Tomatoes, herbs, and wildflowers that attracted butterflies and hummingbirds. The physical work felt good after spending all week in the sterile hospital environment. In the afternoons, she would take long walks through the forest trails, discovering new paths and hidden clearings. Sometimes she would pack a lunch and spend hours sitting by the creek, reading a book or just listening to the water flow over the smooth rocks. The neighbors were exactly as friendly as the previous owner had promised. There was an elderly couple, the Hendersons, who lived in the cabin next door. They had been there for 15 years and knew everything about the local wildlife and the best hiking spots. Mrs. Henderson would often bring over fresh-baked cookies and stay for coffee on the front porch. "You picked a good time to join us," Mr. Henderson told her one Saturday morning. "This community has always been peaceful. We keep to ourselves mostly, but we look out for each other when needed." The homeowners association seemed reasonable enough. They collected modest monthly dues to maintain the gravel roads and keep the common areas clean. There was a small community center where residents occasionally gathered for potluck dinners or holiday celebrations. Lisa attended a few of these events and found the other residents to be down-to-earth people who had chosen this quiet mountain community for the same reasons she had. For 3 wonderful years, Lisa's cabin was her sanctuary. She hosted her sister's family for summer barbecues on the back deck. Her teenage nephew loved exploring the forest and building forts out of fallen branches. Her elderly parents visited in the fall to see the leaves change colors, sitting bundled in blankets on the front porch while Lisa served them hot chocolate. During the week in the city, Lisa would find herself daydreaming about her next weekend at the cabin. She kept photos of the property on her desk at work, and her coworkers got used to hearing her stories about the wildlife she had spotted, or the vegetables she was growing in her garden. The cabin became more than just a weekend retreat. It was proof that hard work and patience could make dreams come true. Every time Lisa unlocked the front door and stepped inside, she felt proud of what she had accomplished. This was hers, bought and paid for with her own money, maintained with her own hands. But changes were coming to Sunset Ridge community, though Lisa didn't know it yet. The peaceful life she had built was about to be challenged in ways she never could have imagined. Sometimes the greatest threats come from the places where you least expect them, and Lisa was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The trouble started with a single piece of mail on a Tuesday morning. Lisa was getting ready for work when she noticed the official-looking envelope in her mailbox. The return address read, Sunset Ridge Community Association, in bold letters. Her stomach dropped a little as she tore it open. Notice of violation was printed across the top in red letters. Lisa read the letter twice, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. According to the document, her garden shed was not in compliance with community standards. The shed she had built 3 years ago with proper permits was now somehow against the rules. The fine was $50, and she had 10 days to respond or face additional penalties. Lisa stared at the letter in disbelief. This was the same shed that had been approved by the previous HOA board. She had followed every rule, gotten every signature, and kept all the paperwork in her files. At work that day, Lisa couldn't concentrate. During her lunch break, she called the HOA office to ask about the violation notice. The woman who answered the phone sounded rushed and unfriendly. The new president has updated our architectural standards, she explained curtly. All structures need to comply with current regulations, regardless of when they were built. But I have the original approval documents, Lisa protested. Everything was done properly. Previous approvals don't matter anymore. You need to bring your property into compliance or face escalating fines. Lisa hung up, feeling frustrated and confused. She had never heard of rules changing retroactively like this. That weekend, she drove up to the cabin, determined to get to the bottom of the situation. Mrs. Henderson was working in her flower garden when Lisa arrived. She waved Lisa over with a worried expression on her face. Have you gotten any of those violation letters? Mrs. Henderson asked quietly, glancing around as if someone might be listening. Just one so far. About my garden shed. Mrs. Henderson shook her head sadly. We've gotten 3 already. Our mailbox is apparently the wrong color now. Our fence is 6 inches too tall, and our deck stain doesn't match the approved color palette. Each violation comes with a fine. Lisa felt her heart sink. When did all this start? Right after the new HOA president took over 6 months ago. He's been sending out violation notices left and right. The Johnsons down the road got hit with 8 violations in 1 month. They're talking about selling and moving away. That evening, Lisa attended her first HOA meeting in over a year. The community center was packed with angry residents, all clutching violation notices and frustrated expressions. At the front of the room sat a man in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit and a stern expression. Robert Kane had been a corporate executive before retiring to Sunset Ridge. He ran the meeting like a business presentation, cutting off anyone who tried to ask questions or voice complaints. When Lisa raised her hand to speak about her shed violation, he barely looked up from his notes. The architectural committee has determined that numerous structures in this community fail to meet current standards, he announced. Property owners have 30 days to bring their properties into compliance or face additional enforcement measures. But these structures were all approved by previous boards, called out Mr. Johnson from the back of the room. Kane's expression hardened. Previous boards were clearly too lenient. We're implementing proper standards now to protect property values and maintain community aesthetics. Lisa left the meeting feeling worse than when she arrived. Over the next few weeks, more violation notices appeared in her mailbox. Her mailbox post was apparently the wrong style. The natural wood stain on her cabin didn't match the new color requirements. Even her small vegetable garden was cited for being inconsistent with landscaping standards. Each violation came with increasing fines. What started as $50 Penalties quickly jumped to $100, then $200 per infraction. Lisa calculated that she was facing over $1,000 in fines for features of her property that had been perfectly legal just months earlier. She tried appealing the violations, submitting her original permits and approval documents. But each appeal was denied with form letters stating that current standards supersede previous approvals. Lisa began to suspect that Kane had a personal agenda, but she couldn't figure out what it might be. The stress was affecting her work and her sleep. Her peaceful weekend retreats became anxiety-filled visits as she waited for the next violation notice to appear. Other residents were suffering too. The Johnsons had indeed put their property up for sale, unable to afford the mounting fines. 3 other families were considering leaving as well. Mrs. Henderson confided that she and her husband were scared. "We're on a fixed income," she whispered. "We can't afford these fines, but we can't afford to move either." This was supposed to be our forever home. Lisa realized that Kane's aggressive enforcement was tearing apart the close-knit community she had come to love. But the worst was yet to come. In her mailbox one Friday evening, she found a certified letter that made her blood run cold. Pico. Letter was longer than the previous violations, filled with legal language that was hard to understand. But the meaning was clear enough. Lisa had 30 days to remove all non-compliant structures from her property or face necessary enforcement action by the association. The letter was vague about what exactly constituted enforcement action, but the threatening tone was unmistakable. Lisa sat on her front porch that evening, watching the sunset and wondering how her dream home had turned into a nightmare. She had no idea that Kane's plans for her property went far beyond simple rule enforcement, and that her 30 days were about to become the most important month of her life. Lisa was reviewing patient charts at the hospital when her phone started buzzing on her desk. It was a Tuesday morning in March, and she had just finished her rounds in the pediatric ward. The caller ID showed Mrs. Henderson's number, which was strange because her elderly neighbor usually only called in the evenings. "Hello, Mrs. Henderson, is everything okay?" The voice on the other end was shaking with panic and disbelief. "Lisa, you need to drop everything and get here right now. They're destroying your cabin." Lisa's pen froze in her hand. "What do you mean destroying? Who's destroying what?" "There are bulldozers and big trucks everywhere. Men in hard hats are knocking down your walls with machines. I tried to stop them, but they have official papers. Lisa, your beautiful cabin is being torn apart right now as we speak." The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. She stood up so quickly that her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "That's impossible. Nobody can just tear down someone's house. There has to be some kind of mistake." "I wish it was a mistake, dear, but I'm watching it happen from my kitchen window. The whole front wall is already gone. They're loading pieces of your cabin into trucks like it's garbage." Lisa's hand started shaking as she grabbed her purse and car keys. She told her supervisor there was a family emergency and that she had to leave immediately. The 3-hour drive from the city to Sunset Ridge had never felt so long. Every mile seemed to stretch forever as she pressed harder on the gas pedal. Mrs. Henderson called her twice during the drive with updates that made Lisa's heart sink deeper each time. "They just knocked down the back wall where your kitchen was," came the first update, Mrs. Henderson's voice breaking. "I can see your refrigerator lying on its side in the rubble." The second call was even worse. "They're using some kind of machine to break up the stone fireplace. Lisa, I'm so sorry. I tried to call the police, but they said the men have proper permits and there's nothing they can do." Lisa could barely see the road through her tears. This couldn't be happening. She owned that property free and clear. She had the deed, the permits, all the paperwork. Nobody could just show up and destroy someone's home without warning. There had to be laws against this kind of thing. When Lisa finally reached the entrance to Sunset Ridge Community, she could see a cloud of dust hanging in the air above the trees. Her stomach twisted as she turned onto her street and saw the scene that would be burned into her memory forever. Where her cozy log cabin had stood that morning, there was now just a pile of broken wood, twisted metal, and chunks of concrete. A yellow bulldozer sat nearby like some kind of mechanical monster, its engine still running and black smoke coming from its exhaust pipe. Men in orange safety vests were loading debris into a large truck, treating the remains of her dream home like construction waste. Lisa parked her car and ran toward what used to be her property, but a worker in a hard hat stepped in front of her. "Sorry, miss. This is an active work zone. Too dangerous for people who aren't authorized to be here." "Authorized? This is my property. This is my cabin. What have you people done?" That's when Robert Kane appeared from behind one of the trucks. He was carrying a clipboard and wearing the kind of satisfied expression that made Lisa's blood boil. He walked over with the casual confidence of someone who had just completed a routine task. "Ms. Miller, I tried multiple times to contact you about this emergency situation," Kane said in a tone that sounded like he had practiced it. "When we couldn't reach you this morning, we had to proceed with the necessary safety measures to protect the community." "Safety measures? You destroyed my home. You had no right to do this." Kane pulled a folder from his clipboard and showed Lisa several documents that looked official and intimidating. "Your property was determined to be structurally unsafe after our inspection last week. Combined with your unpaid fines that now total over $3,000, the HOA board held an emergency vote last night to authorize immediate demolition." Lisa stared at the papers, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. "I never received any notice about an inspection. Nobody told me about any emergency board meeting. And I was never informed that my fines had reached that amount. We sent certified letters to your address of record," Kane replied smoothly. "We also attempted to call the phone number in our files multiple times this morning. When we received no response and couldn't locate you on the property, we had to act quickly to prevent potential injury to other residents." Lisa knew she was being lied to, but standing there surrounded by the ruins of her cabin, she felt completely helpless. Kane seemed to have an answer for everything, and his paperwork looked legitimate even though she knew it couldn't be. She walked closer to the pile of debris and felt like she was going to be sick. Scattered throughout the broken wood and twisted metal were pieces of her life. Her grandmother's antique rocking chair was smashed beyond recognition. The handmade quilt that had been on her couch was torn and covered in dust and dirt. Her collection of books was scattered like confetti among chunks of drywall. "My belongings," Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. "All of my personal things were inside." Kane consulted his clipboard again with the same cold efficiency. "Property owners are responsible for removing personal belongings before any enforcement action takes place. The demolition order specifically stated that personal property removal was not included in the work scope. But I didn't know about any demolition. I was at work when this happened. Nobody warned me. As I explained, we made multiple attempts to contact you. The safety situation required immediate action, and we couldn't delay the demolition any longer." Mrs. Henderson had been watching the confrontation from her front porch, and now she walked over with tears streaming down her face. "Lisa, I tried everything I could to stop them. I offered to call you myself. I showed them my phone with your number in it. But this man said they had their orders and couldn't wait for anything." Lisa pulled out her phone and checked her call log, her voicemail, and her text messages. There were no missed calls from Kane or anyone at the HOA office. No voicemails warning her about any demolition. No text messages or emails about emergency board meetings. She showed Kane her phone screen. "Look at this. There are no calls from you or your office. You never tried to contact me at all." Kane barely glanced at her phone. "Our records clearly show multiple contact attempts throughout the morning. Perhaps you experienced some kind of technical issue with your cellular service provider." The demolition crew finished loading the last pieces of Lisa's cabin into their trucks and began putting away their equipment. Within an hour, they were gone, leaving behind only a bare patch of dirt where her dream home had stood just that morning. As the sun began to set, Lisa sat on Mrs. Henderson's porch steps, staring at the empty lot where her cabin used to be. She felt numb, like she was trapped in a nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. Everything she had worked for, everything she had saved for, was gone. "What am I going to do now?" Lisa asked quietly. "Everything I had is destroyed." Mrs. Henderson sat down beside her and took her hand gently. "We're going to fight this, dear. What happened here today wasn't legal, and it wasn't right. Kane may think he's won, but good people don't let bullies get away with destroying other people's lives." As darkness fell over Sunset Ridge, Lisa felt something stirring inside her chest. It wasn't the crushing despair that had overwhelmed her all day. It was something harder and more determined. Cain had taken her home and her belongings, but he hadn't broken her spirit. This wasn't over. Lisa barely slept that night. She stayed at a small motel near Sunset Ridge, staring at the ceiling and replaying the day's events over and over in her mind. By 6 a.m, she was already dressed and ready to start fighting back. Mrs. Henderson had given her the name of a law firm in town that had helped her cousin with a property dispute years ago. Thompson and Associates had a small office on Main Street, sandwiched between a coffee shop and a hardware store. Lisa sat in the waiting room, clutching a folder full of documents and trying to stay calm. When the receptionist called her name, she followed her into a modest office where a woman in her 40s was reviewing some papers. "I'm Jennifer Thompson," the attorney said, standing up to shake Lisa's hand. "Mrs. Henderson called me last night and told me what happened to your property. I have to say, in 20 years of practicing law, I've never heard of anything quite like this." Lisa spent the next hour telling Jennifer everything that had happened, starting with the first violation notice and ending with watching her cabin get torn down. Jennifer took careful notes and asked detailed questions about every document Lisa had brought. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Jennifer said, flipping through Lisa's paperwork. "They demolished your entire house while you were at work, claiming it was an emergency, but they never actually contacted you beforehand?" "That's exactly right. Cain said they tried to call me, but when I showed him my phone, there were no missed calls or messages. He claimed there must have been a technical problem with my phone service." Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "And all these violation notices are for things that were perfectly legal when you built them?" "Every single one. I have the original permits and approval letters from when I first bought the property. Everything was done properly and legally." Jennifer spent the next 2 hours going through every document in Lisa's folder. She examined the property deed, the building permits, the HOA bylaws from when Lisa first moved in, and each violation notice. As she read, her expression grew more serious. "Lisa, what they did to you was completely illegal," Jennifer finally said. "Even if you had owed money to the HOA, which I don't think you actually did, they can't just tear down your house. There are strict legal procedures they have to follow, including going to court and getting a judge's permission. So we can sue them?" "We can do a lot more than that, but first I need to do some investigating. Something about this whole situation feels very planned and deliberate. People don't destroy houses this quickly unless they have a very specific reason for wanting that land." Over the next week, Jennifer worked like a detective trying to solve a puzzle. She filed requests for public records, talked to other residents in the community, and started digging into Cain's background and business dealings. What she discovered made Lisa's situation even more outrageous. "I found something very interesting," Jennifer told Lisa when she came to the office the following Friday. "Cain's construction company submitted a bid for a major expansion project at your community center 3 months ago. Guess where they're planning to build the new addition?" Lisa felt her stomach drop. "Don't tell me it's on my property." "Right. Where your cabin used to stand. The architectural plans were submitted to the county planning office before you even received your first violation notice. Cain was planning to take your land from the very beginning." Jennifer spread out copies of the architectural drawings across her desk. The proposed clubhouse expansion would cover Lisa's entire 2-acre lot, including the peaceful forest area where she used to take her morning walks. The construction contract was worth over $200,000 to Cain's company. But how could he submit plans for property he didn't even own? Lisa asked. "That's the really sneaky part. Look at this notation on the plans." Jennifer pointed to small text in the corner of the drawings. It says, "Future HOA acquisition." Cain was so confident he could force you off your property that he was already making detailed construction plans. Jennifer had also discovered that Cain hadn't just targeted Lisa. He had been systematically going after other properties in the community that would be valuable for development. The Johnson family, who had been forced to sell their home months earlier because of mounting fines, had owned a prime lot that Cain's company was now planning to turn into premium parking spaces for the expanded clubhouse. He's been using his position as HOA president to identify valuable properties and then force the owners out so he can develop the land, Jennifer explained. It's actually a very sophisticated scheme, but it's completely illegal. The breakthrough in their investigation came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Henderson called Jennifer's office 3 days later, sounding excited and nervous at the same time. "I just remembered something important," she said. "During all the chaos on Tuesday, I completely forgot that my home security system was recording everything. The cameras were running all day and caught the whole demolition." Jennifer and Lisa rushed to Mrs. Henderson's house to review the security footage. What they saw was even more damaging to Kane than they had hoped. The video clearly showed Kane arriving at Lisa's property at 7 in the morning, a full 2 hours before the demolition crew showed up. The cameras captured Kane walking around Lisa's cabin with his clipboard, taking photographs from every angle and making detailed notes. Most importantly, the audio system picked up a phone conversation Kane had with someone at the demolition company. "Yeah, we need to get this done, fast today," Kane could be heard saying on the recording. "No delays, no waiting around for anything. The owner works in the city during the week, so we should have the whole day to finish the job without any interference." This proves that Kane knew exactly when you wouldn't be home and deliberately scheduled the demolition for a time when you couldn't defend your property, Jennifer said, her eyes lighting up with excitement. This completely destroys his story about emergency safety concerns. But the security footage revealed even more damaging evidence. Mrs. Henderson's cameras also recorded Kane's conversation with her when she tried to stop the demolition. On the video, Kane clearly told her that they didn't have time to wait for Lisa and that the demolition had to proceed immediately according to schedule. This directly contradicted his later claims that he had tried multiple times to contact Lisa. The video proved that Kane had no intention of giving Lisa any opportunity to respond or save her belongings. Jennifer also managed to get copies of financial records that showed suspicious money transfers between the HOA's bank accounts and Kane's personal construction business. Money that was supposed to be used for community road maintenance and landscaping was being quietly moved to pay for legal fees and administrative costs related to Kane's property acquisition scheme. "Kane has been stealing from the HOA to fund his land grab operation," Jennifer told Lisa. "Every resident in your community has been unknowingly paying for Kane to destroy their neighbors' homes." Within a week, Jennifer had compiled enough evidence to file multiple lawsuits against Kane, including wrongful destruction of property, fraud, abuse of authority, and theft of community funds. But more importantly, she petitioned the court for immediate emergency action to prevent Kane from causing any more damage. "We're going to ask the judge to freeze all of Kane's assets while we investigate the full extent of his criminal activities," Jennifer explained to Lisa. "If he's been systematically stealing land and money from his own community, we need to make sure he can't hide or spend any more of it." Lisa felt a mixture of hope and nervous energy as they prepared for their court hearing. Kane had destroyed her home and turned her life upside down, but now she had a real chance to fight back with solid evidence and a skilled attorney on her side. "Kane thought he was being very clever with his scheme," Jennifer said as they left, her office with boxes full of evidence. "But criminals always make mistakes when they get overconfident, and Kane made plenty of them. He's about to learn that you can't just steal people's homes and expect to get away with it forever." Monday morning brought news that Lisa had been hoping for but hardly dared to expect. She was getting dressed for work when Jennifer called with barely contained excitement in her voice. "The judge approved our emergency motion this morning," Jennifer announced. "As of 8 a.m. today, every single one of Kane's bank accounts is frozen solid. His business accounts, personal savings, investment portfolios, retirement funds, everything is completely locked down." Lisa sat down heavily on her bed, feeling a wave of relief and satisfaction wash over her. "You mean he can't touch any of his money?" "Not one penny." Judge Patterson was absolutely furious when she read through our evidence file. She said Kane's abuse of HOA authority was one of the most blatant cases of corruption she'd seen in 30 years on the bench. Kane's about to get a taste of what it feels like to have his world turned upside down, without any warning. The effects of the court order began showing up almost immediately. Kane's automatic mortgage payment bounced when his bank tried to process it that morning. His credit cards were declined when he stopped for coffee on his way to a construction site. The payroll system for his company couldn't access the business accounts, leaving his workers confused and angry when their paychecks didn't arrive. Mrs. Henderson called Lisa that evening with an update from the community, and there was obvious satisfaction in her elderly voice. "You should have seen Kane at the mailbox this afternoon," she reported. "He looked like someone had punched him in the stomach." His wife came storming out of their house 20 minutes later, yelling about their credit cards being rejected at the grocery store. "I think reality is finally starting to hit them." But the asset freeze was just the beginning of Kane's problems. Jennifer had been building a much larger case, and her investigation kept uncovering more victims of Kane's schemes throughout the area. "We've now identified 14 families who were forced out of their homes by Kane's fake violation campaigns," Jennifer told Lisa when she visited the law office later that week. In every single case, Kane's construction company ended up benefiting from the forced sales, either through development contracts or direct property acquisition. The evidence against Kane was growing into a mountain of proof. Financial records showed that he had been systematically stealing money from HOA accounts for over 2 years. Money that residents thought was going toward road repairs and community improvements had actually been funding Kane's elaborate property theft operation. Even more damaging, Jennifer had discovered that Kane had been creating fake safety inspection reports to justify his emergency demolitions. The supposed structural problems that led to Lisa's cabin being destroyed had been completely made up. No licensed building inspector had ever examined her property. Kane was basically playing 3 roles at once, Jennifer explained to Lisa. He was the inspector who found the problems, the judge who decided they were dangerous, and the executioner who ordered the demolitions. It was a one-man corruption machine. The case took a dramatic turn when other families started coming forward after hearing about Lisa's lawsuit through local news coverage. The Johnson family, who had been forced to sell their beautiful lakefront property months earlier, contacted Jennifer with their own horror story. "Kane did exactly the same thing to us," Mr. Johnson explained during a meeting at Jennifer's office. "Violation after violation, fine after fine, until we couldn't afford to keep fighting. We thought we were alone, but now we realize it was all part of his master plan to steal our land." Within days, Jennifer's office was filled with angry residents, each bringing their own collection of fake violation notices and inflated fines. Together, their stories painted a clear picture of systematic abuse that had been destroying the community for years. The local television station picked up the story when Jennifer filed a massive class action lawsuit representing all of Kane's victims. The evening news headline read, "HOA President Accused of Multi-Million-Dollar Land Theft Scheme." The report detailed how Kane had used his trusted position to systematically rob his own neighbors. Kane tried to fight back through his expensive lawyer, claiming that all his actions had been legitimate HOA enforcement. But his defense completely fell apart when investigators found email conversations between Kane and his business partners discussing which properties to target next for their acquisition program. One email was particularly devastating to Kane's case. In a message to his construction company partner, Kane had written, "The Miller property will be the easiest one to take. She only shows up on weekends, so we can handle the demolition on a weekday when she's stuck at her job in the city and can't cause any problems for us." This email proved beyond any doubt that Kane had deliberately planned Lisa's demolition for a time when she couldn't defend herself. It completely destroyed his claims about emergency safety concerns and revealed his true criminal intentions. The criminal investigation moved at lightning speed once all the evidence became public. The district attorney's office filed serious charges against Kane, including fraud, theft, conspiracy, and abuse of public office. The HOA board, finally understanding how badly they had been manipulated, voted unanimously to remove Kane from all positions and ban him from community property. Kane's construction empire collapsed within weeks of the asset freeze. With his accounts locked and his reputation in ruins, he couldn't pay suppliers, workers, or equipment loans. Construction projects throughout the region were abandoned as word spread about his criminal charges and frozen assets. The community began healing in ways that Kane had never intended. Residents who had been too scared to speak up during his reign of terror now felt safe sharing their experiences. They discovered that Cain had been intimidating board members who questioned his decisions and hiding important financial information from the community. 6 months after her cabin was destroyed, Lisa stood in the courthouse gallery, as Cain was, sentenced to 5 years in prison for his crimes. The judge ordered him to pay full compensation to all his victims, though his frozen assets would only cover about half of what he had stolen over the years. "Mr. Cain," the judge said during sentencing, "you systematically violated the trust of an entire community. You used your elected position to steal from the very people who put their faith in you to protect their interests. Your actions were calculated, deliberate, and caused tremendous harm to hard-working families who trusted you." Lisa received a settlement that allowed her to purchase an even better property in a different community, one with strong oversight rules for HOA management. But more importantly, she had helped expose a criminal operation that could have continued destroying families for years to come. Standing outside the courthouse after Cain's sentencing, Lisa reflected on the incredible journey from that terrible morning when Mrs. Henderson called about the bulldozers. She had lost her dream cabin, but she had gained something much more valuable: the knowledge that ordinary people can fight back against corruption and actually win. Mrs. Henderson, now 82 years old, had made the drive to see Cain's sentencing in person. She hugged Lisa tightly on the courthouse steps with tears of joy in her eyes. "You did it, dear," she whispered. "You made sure he can never hurt another family the way he hurt you. Your cabin may be gone, but Cain's power to destroy people's lives is gone forever." Lisa smiled as they walked toward their cars together. Sometimes justice moves slowly, but when it finally arrives, it can be swift and complete. Cain had learned the hard way that people who abuse their power often find that same power turned against them in the end.